Story 1. Broke up with my girlfriend of 3 years because she wanted to stay a virgin. Now she wants to get back together after losing it to another man. I, 23M, met my ex, 21F, 3 years ago. We lived on campus at university in different halls of residence. After a few months, we got together and, for the most part, had a very happy relationship. There was always one issue, though. My ex grew up in a very religious home. Her father is a pastor. She has been open with her family that she does not share their faith. They weren't happy about it but accepted that she has to make her own choices on that. Nevertheless, I think some of that religious upbringing was still in her mind. I grew up in a different religion but was never very serious about it, and I'm no longer religious. Our relationship was pretty normal, except that she told me very early that she was a virgin and wanted to stay that way until she was married. It wasn't for religious reasons, as I mentioned. She isn't religious, but she was very focused on not disappointing her dad. We did other sexual things, just not intercourse. I never had much luck with girls growing up, and going into the relationship I was a virgin, and I still am, at least if you classify being a virgin as never having had intercourse. Anyway, I was becoming more resentful of the fact that everyone I know was having normal sexual relationships, and we weren't. I couldn't understand why she didn't want to have a full sexual relationship, though of course I never pressured her about it. I felt that, while I was at university and pretty broke, getting married was something for the future. Last year, I was in my last year of university, and she was working in her first professional job. Her degree was shorter than mine, so she finished university first, despite being younger than me. She was talking a lot about all these successful guys she met at work, which did make me feel lesser as I was still a broke university student. Coupled with her still not wanting a full sexual relationship, it did make me feel more resentful. We had some arguments about it, and after a while I felt that I should end the relationship as we wanted different things, and our lives were on different paths. It was awful. She was crying a lot, and I felt terrible afterwards. Anyway, it has been nearly 6 months since we broke up. We haven't been in touch at all for most of that time. I have not been involved with anyone else in that time as I was 100% focused on finishing my degree. I have finally finished university and am about to start my first professional job. She recently got in touch again and asked to meet up. I was hesitant but decided we had so much good history that I should hear her out. She told me she's been missing me terribly these past 6 months, that she thinks she wants to get back together and is open to having a sexual relationship now. I asked her why now, what changed, and she looked uncomfortable. After a little prying, she said she had a short-term fling with one of the older guys at work while we were broken up, which of course was fine as she wasn't my girlfriend anymore. Anyway, she said he persisted with her until she started having sex with him. She ended it with him recently. She was clear that it was consensual but that the guy was very persistent with pursuing sex with her. I was gutted. I couldn't understand why she'd make me wait all those years, but was fine doing it with some new guy she'd only been seeing a short time. I asked if the reason she was open to having a sexual relationship now is because she wasn't a virgin anymore. She said yes. I asked her to give me some space to process all this. I'm conflicted and would love some advice on this. I have missed her a lot and still have strong feelings for her. But at the same time, it feels like I was strung along for years. It's hard to put my finger on why I don't want to take her back. Everything logically makes sense for us to get back together. I'd even get to finally have a sexual relationship with her. But I feel awful about this whole thing and don't want to ignore those feelings. Additional info. Some of the comments are being very harsh on my ex, and I guess that's not surprising. You don't know her. She's not some evil, manipulative villain at all. I would never have been with anyone like that. She's still the funny, smart, charming, beautiful girl I always knew. Any guy would be lucky to have her. I would be too if I could handle the baggage here, but I'm thinking I probably can't, and a clean break is the way to go. Though she may regret the relationship with the other man, it's not my business as she was a single woman, and we were broken up. I wasn't ever expecting to hear from her again. Really? This whole situation is very surprising to me. I'm feeling hurt because I guess this is a solid blow to my ego, that I feel like the lesser man here. I can own that, and that's something for me to work on. Ultimately, I have some hang-ups about sex from this relationship that I need to deal with. A few people have suggested I could benefit from therapy. I'm gonna look into that. I think I need help to process all these emotions from this situation. Comment where OP has replied. I would ask her why she was willing to sleep with this guy after such a short relationship, but after 3 years she was not willing to sleep with you. OP, I think this is the right question because I don't know why she didn't say all she said was that the guy was persistent. I'm torn about whether to simply text her that I don't want to rekindle things and leave it all in the past, or whether I should ask more questions about what happened because this hurts. I don't know if I'm ready to get details of her relationship with the other guy. Sometimes I just feel like I'm stunted in some way. A few comments have said I'm immature, and they're probably right. I know I'm the one who ended the relationship, and that she's entitled to do what she wants with anyone else. Still doesn't make it hurt any less, and maybe it's just best to say goodbye and leave all this in the past. Update 1. This is an update to my last post. Hello again. I appreciate people taking the time to comment on my last post. The response was a lot more than I expected, with over 2,000 comments. I'm amazed so many people wanted to comment about my situation. Thank you. Warning. This post is long. I have kept a daily journal since I was 16. A lot of what follows is dumps from my journal. Yes, I know I'm not concise. I'm going to refer to my ex as Ellie, not her real name. I'd like to write a bit about the comments because so many people took the time to provide their thoughts, and I appreciate that. The majority of comments were some variation of move on, a clean break, a strong recommendation with a lot to recommend it. A minority said, give her a chance and see how it goes. Plenty calling me an a-hole for ending it because I wanted sex in our relationship or for being obsessed with her virginity. That I dumped her because she wouldn't put out, and quite a few saying my breaking up with her made her feel like sex is necessary to keep a guy and that it drove her heartbroken into the next guy's bed. There were a few she's pregnant comments. Not that I know of. It's not impossible, but if that happens it won't be anything to do with me. The dudes saying I should leave her or worse. Seriously, some of you guys need a hug or a psychologist. No, I would never use her like that, no matter our past. Ellie and I were a loving couple for years. That counts for something, even after we broke up. Feeling hurt doesn't justify using her or anyone else for that matter. As for comments that I have some hang up about taking her virginity, my issue when together was that we weren't having sex in our relationship, not whether she was a virgin or not. Her being a virgin was her reason for being abstinent but wasn't directly an issue either way to me. If she hadn't been a virgin and wanted to be abstinent, I would have been in the same situation. The title of my last post was not great, really. I broke up because we were not having sex, not because she was a virgin. Bear in mind, for 3 years, Ellie had everything she wanted from our relationship. Boyfriend, love, affection, loyalty, support, and a guy who respected her wishes to be abstinent. While she got 100% of what she wanted, for me there was a big element missing, and there was no way to reconcile that. Either we were having sex or not having it. Sex requires both to say yes, and that wasn't going to happen. With hindsight, I should have ended the relationship early on when Ellie first told me she wanted to not have sex until marriage. When we got together, I was a naive 19-year-old who had never had a girlfriend before, so I kind of went along with things because I really liked her and got along with her so well. I fell in love with her and then kind of felt stuck in a relationship that wasn't what I wanted. I've learned from this and won't make that mistake in the future. I want to make active, not passive, choices in future relationships, to not just go along with things because that's what the other person wants. Our views about sex and our relationship were not compatible, so I ended the relationship rather than waiting any longer hoping she'd change her mind. It was scary to take that step and I put it off for way too long because I didn't want to hurt her, but I couldn't stay in the relationship just for her. I had to also consider myself, too. My mistake was waiting so long to get to that point. I regret that as it had caused her more hurt than if I'd ended it early on. Many of you say that sex just isn't that important, but for me it is, at least as part of a relationship. You can disagree, that's fine. Some people are fine being in no-sex relationships. No judgment. For me, but that's not what I want. Some people took issue with me saying I felt she strung me along. On reflection, that's fair. Ellie was clear to me about wanting to not have sex until marriage. I foolishly stayed way too long hoping she'd change her mind one day. She didn't. That was my mistake. I strung myself along, really. She never led me on in any way. It hurt to learn that she had sex with the next guy relatively quickly after I waited so long. But she is my ex, so that is not my business anymore. She is allowed to change her mind. She can have sex or not with whoever she chooses. I don't get a say in that. My hurt is an emotional response, not a logical one. Logically, I see she did nothing wrong by me. I'll get over it. It's just my bruised ego if I'm honest with myself, feeling I'm somehow a lesser man because she took that step with the next guy. I know objectively that isn't true, but I sure feel it. I was not a perfect boyfriend, and I have made mistakes. I have learned from them. I don't regret breaking up with Ellie and still think it was the right decision for me. Enough background. A few things have happened. Last weekend was the Australia Day long weekend. I was on a camping trip in the Grampians. For any Aussies reading, it was so nice to be in nature, to do some bushwalks with friends and decompress. It felt good to talk about the Ellie situation with my mates around the campfire. Most of them knew Ellie pretty well from our years together, and they had a range of views just like the commenters on my post, and I got the usual good-natured about still being a virgin. I learned there's an expensive bottle of scotch they bought a while ago that's going to have its seal cracked when mine is. Bastards. Ugh. One great question a friend asked was whether I would have ever decided to reach out and take Ellie back if she never reached out to me first. The answer is no. It was so obvious to me that it cut through a lot of the confusion for me. I was being too passive in the situation and needed to do what I wanted, not just react to what Ellie wanted. By the time I was on the way home, I had decided to not get back together with her. But that was moot when I was driving home and got a mobile signal again. No mobile network where we had camped. The network delivered a bunch of messages from Ellie all at once. She said she was wrong to ask me to get back together and that she's back with Tim, fake name, now. She also texted that the thing with Tim is more serious than she told me when she last met with me. She apologized for misleading me about her and Tim's relationship. If you remember, she called it a fling before she asked if we could meet to talk about it. I was not happy, so I just texted back, no. Not very mature of me, but I wasn't in the mood to hear more about all this, and I was surprised and pissed off that she lied to me. That seemed very out of character for her. She tried calling me, but I didn't want to answer. She sent another text saying, Tim and I had a fight. I shouldn't have come to you, and finally, I'm sorry. When I got home, I was an idiot and let my curiosity get the better of me. I looked up Tim online. His real given name is uncommon, so it wasn't hard to find. Found him on LinkedIn, which gave me his full name. Ellie is one of his connections, and he works at the same firm, so I was confident it's him. He's a director at their firm, one level below partner. He also has pics on Insta. Lots of posts about his adventures around the world at various events and exotic places, as well as shots with an expensive-looking car. A few photos of him with Ellie with their arms around each other in Singapore in November. I guess that confirms it was serious. He wouldn't have public pics with her for a casual fling. All that just made me feel bad. No good comes from comparing myself to my ex's successful boyfriend. Ellie is not my girlfriend, and I'm not in competition with Tim, so I won't do that again. My ego is bruised enough already. I've been living a very frugal life my whole time at university, aka poor as hell, so I know I can feel inferior when I see people with wealth. That's another me problem to sort out. Anyway, all that was on Sunday afternoon/evening. On Tuesday evening, Ellie knocked at my door. She said that she knows I didn't want to talk to her, but she felt bad about everything and hoped I would let her explain herself. Clear the air? Then I'd never see her again if that's what I wanted. I let her in. I was not happy with recent events, but figured I might at least get a clearer idea of what's going on. It was a long, heavy conversation, over 4 hours, but here's the gist as I remember it. When we broke up, she was devastated. She said it took a couple of months before she started to feel a bit better. She missed me constantly and wanted to see me the whole time, but when I ended it, we agreed to keep apart and heal. In September, she met Tim at work. He manages a different team. She doesn't work for him. She said he was very charming and attractive and showed almost immediate interest in her. They got to know each other and he asked her out. She was worried it was a rebound but felt so much better getting his attention that she went along with it. After dating for a while, she developed feelings for him, and that later led to a sexual relationship. It wasn't a fling, and she dated him for a while beforehand. I asked about whether he had pressured her into sex. Last time she said he was very persistent. She said she was trying to not upset me. She thought if she gave the impression she was reluctant to have sex with Tim that I wouldn't think as badly of her. So it was a story to try and spare my feelings. I told her it just made me worried she had been assaulted. She looked shocked at that and said, "No way, she was actually the one who initiated their sexual relationship." I said, although I don't like that she lied to me, I can understand why. I don't think she did anything wrong changing her mind about abstinence. Yes, I was hurt when she told me she was having sex, but I have no right to judge her for anything. She's a single adult, and it's her life. I don't think badly of her. She burst into tears and said something like, "I thought you must hate me now." I assured her that I didn't. She said she was sad it didn't work for us, but that she never would have dropped her virginity commitment if we had not broken up. After we broke up, she decided that it was a commitment she made to her dad when she was still a kid, and it was messing with the life she wants now. So, by the time she and Tim got into their relationship, she had already decided she was ready for sex with the right person. I asked about her dad, and she just said he doesn't need to know. I asked about why she asked to get back together. Tim is older. She told me he's 32 and has been at the firm 10 years. One day at work, one of the women made a snarky comment to Ellie about being another one of Tim's girls. She did some digging and it turns out Tim has a history. He has dated a long list of women from work. Several of them were young graduate employees just like Ellie. The rumor around the office is that Ellie is just the next girl to get used by him. She was horrified. She accused him of using her. They argued, and she told him it was over. Soon after that, she came to me. She felt as if we might be able to rekindle things now that she was open to a sexual relationship. But my hesitation and time to calm down made her realize that was a mistake. Over the weekend, Tim asked her to work things out. She decided to give it a chance. She tried to call me, but they went to voicemail. I was camping, so she sent those messages instead. So I guess settled. I don't want her back, and she's in a relationship, so she doesn't want me back either. We chatted a bit about how our families are going. She congratulated me on finally finishing university. She asked if I had been seeing anyone, and when I told her I'd been studying hard and working a lot since exams. Retail job with no time for girls. She laughed and said, "I'm still a big nerd." She hoped we could be friendly if we ever see each other, but she wants to keep out of contact out of respect for her relationship with Tim. She wants to give it a real chance of working, which is fair enough. She gave me a hug, said thank you for understanding, and left. So there you have it. Ellie involved me in her relationship drama. I would have preferred she hadn't, but at least it's sorted now. I'm glad I paid attention to my feelings and took time out to consider things, as it could have been very messy if I had taken her back. Trusting my gut has been the biggest lesson for me in all this. I still care for her despite recent events. It seems like she is dealing with a lot of complicated things between her new relationship and work gossip. I wish her well and hope she will be happy, whether it's with Tim or not. She was my first love, and I expect I'll always have warm memories of her. But I am clear now that I don't want her back. She is my past, and I want to look forward. Well, this has become an essay. Tutors at university always told me I was too waffly in my writing. Well, those guys can go to hell. I'm not a student anymore. I can now focus on launching my new career with no distractions. I've worked so hard for so long to get here. My new job starts on Monday. It's going to be so great building actual, real experience in my new profession, not just endless theory. I'll be earning much better money. No more student poverty, and I've got graduation and a new job to look forward to as well. I'm open to finding someone new, but that is way down my priority list. I'm not going to actively pursue that anytime soon. Cheers everyone for your comments and advice. Comments where OP has replied. Comment 1. Glad you came to the conclusion best for you. However, I feel you gave Ellie too much of what she wanted to feel better about herself at the expense of your own emotional well-being. OP. I was already pretty turned up about things from when she first asked to get back together. I wish she hadn't done that, but after she came to see me on Tuesday, it was easier for me. We got to mutually say no to a future together and also put a lot of baggage in the bin. Is Ellie going to be happy? I don't know. I hope so, but I have my doubts about this Tim dude. but you probably can't trust my judgment on that. More relevant to me is whether I'm going to be happy. The answer is hell yes, because I'm going to make that happen. OP on Ellie changing comment here. I came to terms with our relationship months ago. When she came back to me, it stirred up some old feelings because we'd been a couple so long. But thinking about it now, that was more of an echo of those memories than real feelings. All of this drama was Ellie's doing. I would have preferred she never involved me, so I could have been blissfully ignorant of her romantic life. I'd prefer to not know about her worldly rich boyfriend or their sex life. She's definitely changed. The Ellie I remember was scrupulous and honest to a fault. The Ellie I've dealt with recently wasn't like that so much. I think that's why her lying to me pissed me off so much. It wasn't just the lying. It was how out of character it seemed. But people change. She's in the business world now, and people there live by different standards to the religious family she grew up in. Anyway, I have cut myself out of her life, so anything that happens with her is hers to deal with. If she comes back to me, I'll remind her we agreed to stay apart and leave it there. I am not looking for another relationship right now, so no Tinder for me, and no, I am not looking for casual sex either. I'm a virgin, but I want a meaningful connection, not just sex. As I said in the post, I'm open to something if the right woman came along, but I'm not actively seeking it. That might change after a while, but right now I want to keep focused on my new career. OP on having closure. A lot of the comments here act like that final meeting was all for her benefit. Sure, she got some kind of relief or closure out of it, but it was also good for me. Seeing who she is becoming just made it 100% no doubt in my mind that we wouldn't ever make sense. She has changed a lot in the last year, starting when we were still together and she had started her job. Random phrases like work hard, play hard, being generally less kind and more dismissive of others. Clearly, she was being influenced by those around her, but it was her choice to take on those behaviors. I love the old Ellie, but I'm not sure I even like the current one much. Anyway, I didn't feel like she intruded. I felt like I got a nice, neat ending to the whole thing and can get on with my life with a clear conscience. But we're clear now that it's over forever, and I have her promise that she will stay out of contact. If she ever does try to come back, I can remind her of her own promise and close the door. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. I work as a computer technician now, but when I was in college, I worked part-time at a well-known chain cafe. Let's call it Seattle's finest. Other than babysitting or under-the-table work helping at a friend's booth at Renaissance fairs, it was my first job. The manager, Eliza, had aspirations for rising in the company at a corporate level. So she was obsessed about making our store the finest, Seattle's finest. At the same time, though, she wasn't an especially effective manager at the store level. She didn't really know how to make all the drinks and had to constantly refer to the recipe cards, even though she was supposed to be an expert on everything and the leader of our store. She also didn't really care to learn, which meant that during a particularly busy rush, she could never step in to help us out in making drink orders. She would basically just hide in her office in the back, near the kitchen. However, she had a college degree, and our company's policy, at least at the time, was that only college degree holders could be the full manager of a store. She left the day-to-day running of the store to Steven, the lead shift supervisor, who had been working at that location for 25 years, since he was 16, who always said that the only reason he's not manager and not running the store is that he doesn't have a college degree. He would always remind all the workers that the store would run into the ground if he wasn't around. Steven didn't really have to do much other than delegate others to do things and make sure orders were sent out to suppliers and to sign those orders when they arrived. Our store followed the standard company practice, so a fixed amount of supplies was usually ordered in every day, with only slight variations to account for a particular store's needs. For example, we might order 60 chocolate muffins a day while the company average is 100 because our store is next to a yoga studio and the ladies who came in ordered less of the fattening junk items. Steve also wrote the schedule every week. When I was hired on, Eliza was the one who interviewed me, and she assured me that I'd get at least 20 hours a week for our shifts to coincide with my school schedule, and I only work Saturdays on the weekend, not Sundays. During my 2-week training period, she kept her word. I'd hover around 18 to 22 hours a week for 4.5 hours at a time. After that, however, since I was fully trained, she passed me over to Steven. Steven followed Eliza's pattern for a week or so, but soon he began trying to schedule me in the mornings, which I couldn't do because of school. He'd pretend to get really angry and disappointed and talk about how, in his 25 years with the company, one of the first things you learn to be is a team player. Well, Steven, I do want to be a team player, but I'm not going to drop my schooling that'll lead to a career to work part-time at a coffee shop. That's great, but I still couldn't work in the morning. So he'd grumble and say, I'll have to talk to Eliza to see what we can do about you. Eliza would only occasionally show up at the store. Usually, she was there mid-morning and left well before closing, and Steve would always open the store, and of course he'd say things like, I've been opening the store for more than 20 years, blah blah, blah. Steven would also try to suck up to customers at the same time and condescend us in front of them, saying things like, forgive her. She's new, and you see what I have to work with. Raw recruits. Oh, sometimes he'd outright call us dumb asses if we couldn't clean things up fast enough or make drinks quickly enough. Like he'd be hanging out in the back counting boxes. Meanwhile, it's 12 p.m. on a Saturday and I'm running the register making all the drinks and our line is 10 people deep, and he sent his other worker off to lunch and he refuses to help, saying, you've got to have your baptism in the fire. Everybody needs to learn to work under pressure. He took himself way too seriously. He thought he was special because he spoke fluent Spanish since he worked in the morning. A lot of people who had early morning jobs would come in, and many of them spoke Spanish only, and he thought it was his specialty that he could communicate with them. Well, my father is from Spain, and I happen to speak fluent Spanish myself. So one Saturday when I opened the store with him, I started speaking Spanish to one of the customers, and the customer complimented me on how well I spoke the language. Steve looked like he was ready to murder me. Whenever customers would come in who spoke Spanish, rather than let me communicate with them, Steve would get off his butt and say, I'll handle this. As time went on, Steve would only schedule me for 8 hours a week and the worst shifts possible, like closing Friday night and immediately opening Saturday morning. I thought, whatever, I'll just start applying to other jobs, but I didn't tell him that, though. I knew he was giving all the hours to his favorites, which were usually the young women who he tried to flirt with. I know this because he tried the same thing with me at first. He said he could give me more hours, but I had to play ball. Nothing that I could actually prove in court, but he was hinting that if I went out with him, he would give me more hours. Like, no thanks, man, you're gross, old, and married. While Eliza was up for promotion to district manager, which meant she would oversee 5 or 6 of Seattle's finest coffee shops instead of just one. However, in a whole team meeting one special Sunday, she said that our store consistently was losing product. She warned us to stop giving discounts to friends, stop giving away free cookies or snacks to friends, etc. And she also said that if we planned to have some of the pastries ourselves, which we were allowed to do during our shifts, we had to make sure to write it down on the store use board. At least during the hours I worked, I've never witnessed anyone giving away free product, and I certainly wasn't using any of it myself. No one gave stuff away other than Steve. Steve got a bonus every time the store use board was below a certain threshold, and he would always accuse us of stealing or giving away things. In fact, he said so at the meeting, and I quote, "Shrinkage is caused by these rookies who think a company runs on 100% profit. It's a business based on cold money, and we're bleeding it when we steal products or give it away. You guys need to stop doing that." Meanwhile, I always noticed Steve giving free discounts to certain customers and giving things away, one of those rules for the not for me type of things. Another worker actually asked him about it, and he said, managers have certain privileges, like, dude, you're not a manager. You make $3 more an hour than me, and you've spent your whole life here. Steve also resented the fact that most of us who worked in the store were college students who would eventually move on someday to something hopefully more financially profitable. Steve would do this working class hero bit where he would talk about how college people were snobs, didn't know how to do real work, were lazy and privileged, and contributed nothing to society. He also mocked me for majoring in computing as a female and accused me of just trying to get my Mrs. degree. He acted like he was kidding, but he was still really slimy. Then he went back to him and how business people's whole day would collapse without people like him to get them started the right way with coffee, saying, I am as indispensable to a large corporation as the CEO. People need their coffee, and they can't start their day without a good cup of coffee. Meanwhile, we're all thinking, calm down, Steve. You're a shift supervisor at a suburban coffee shop, and you wear an apron with your name embroidered on it. You're not curing cancer. But anyway, Eliza's promotion depended on our store reducing its shrinkage. On a date a few days from our Sunday meeting, company bigwigs would come to the store and check out how well Eliza ran things. We were told to look sharp. The bigwigs would be in the dining room chatting with Eliza while the rest of us who were scheduled that day try to look our best. Steve didn't really have an incentive to make Eliza look good because as long as he kept overall shrinkage beneath a certain number, he would still get his bonus, but that threshold was too high for Eliza to earn her promotion. Also, it wasn't as if Steve would become manager if Eliza got promoted. The company would simply get a new manager as an outside hire. Informally, we'd call Steve assistant manager, but the company did not officially recognize him in this capacity. Since he was a long-time worker and worked full-time, he did get health benefits and a 2-week vacation. The rest of us lowly part-timers just got a store discount and some free food or drink while working. We got paid every 2 weeks and we got tips every single week. If you've ever worked at a coffee shop like Seattle's Finest, customers would throw money into a jar at the register if they felt like being generous. The tips would be emptied out every night and eventually, at the end of the week, all the money would be parceled out to the workers depending on the hours they worked. Since I only worked a few hours, my tips were small, but at least it paid for laundry. My school starts a couple of hours after the store opens, and since I wasn't burning too much energy working, I'd get up nice and early every day. The store was close to my apartment and I always walked there. It was the time of the year where the moon was still out early in the morning. I decided that I'd walk to the store and get my tips for the week. My walk to work has me approaching in the direction of the alley entrance, but I intended to enter through the front. Store policy was that you could only enter the back way if you were scheduled to work. As usual, at that hour, our daily supply truck was pulling out of the alley, and there was a huge stack of daily supplies and crates outside the back door. Steve propped open the back door with a trash can and was carrying one crate at a time into the store's back room. My first instinct was to help him, but then I remembered I wasn't being paid that day, and besides, I don't like Steve. I was fascinated watching him as he worked because usually he's so lazy. I was behind cars and trees so he couldn't see me. He stopped working, but there was still a crate left at the back door. It was filled with what looked like to be dessert bags of coffee and random boxes of granola bars. In addition to coffees and pastries, our store also sold third-party nutrition bars, the kind where you can buy a box of 6 for $4 at the grocery store, but we charge you $2.99 for one. He was still talking on a cell phone, and only a minute or two later, a beat-up car pulls into the alley. The driver pops the trunk, and Steve puts the crate into the car, and the car speeds off. Steve then goes back into the store. At first, I tried to rationalize what I'd seen. Maybe it was just a work-related thing that I didn't understand because I wasn't a shift supervisor. Maybe the person in the car was from another store, and our store was supposed to be sending those items to them. I decided to forget my tips for the time being and walked back home. By the time I got there, I realized it was most likely that Steve was a thief. I went to school and forgot about it for a few hours, but every now and then in the day, I think about it again. The next morning, I woke up and made sure I had my cell phone ready. I waited outside really early, even before the supply truck came. When it did come, sure enough, Steve did the same song and dance as the day before. He left one crate outside, called his accomplice on the phone, and the same car arrived. It pulled away after Steve packed its trunk with stolen goodies. I actually worked that day because it was a Saturday. Steve was his usual douche self, but hearing him banter with customers reminded me of other pieces of conversation that I overheard from him over the past many weeks. Steve had a side business, or at least his wife did, selling snacks outside of clubs and sporting events. I put 2 and 2 together and realized that if Steve stole even one crate and sold off its items at a massive discount, he'd still make a pretty penny, and all of it was profit. And he'd stolen a crate 2 days in a row. Who knows how many more crates he'd stolen in the past. I realized that if I told Eliza, she wouldn't believe me, and Steve would deny it. I had to catch him repeatedly doing it over and over again to make my case that it wasn't a one-time thing, which Steve would most likely try to argue. I decided to record Steve for multiple days to make sure my suspicions were correct before I accused him of anything, and that was precisely what I did. Staking out Steve's stealing became my morning ritual for a week. Out of the 4 days, he stole the crate 3 times, and each time I had him recorded. Now all I needed to do was show Eliza my phone, and I'd nail this bastard. I was just about to call her, but then I remembered that big company meeting regarding Eliza's promotion was coming up that Monday afternoon, just a couple of days later. I wasn't scheduled to work, but I knew I could talk my way into the back room with an excuse that I needed my check. Our back room has a computer where we clock in and out. It's just one window on the screen. If you click out of it, you have access to the rest of the computer's functions. One thing the computer always has running in the background is what we call Store TV. It was basically just a series of short infomercials about how wonderful Seattle's finest coffee was, how our beans are from plantations where workers are treated humanely, how we donate to underprivileged communities, things like that. The file was stored as a .wmv file, and the store just played it on a continuous loop. And every so often, Eliza would obtain a new set of infomercials, and we'd loop those out. Our store had one big screen mounted from the ceiling, which faced out into the store, away from the registers. My plan, obviously, was to upload my video of Steve stealing onto the store computer and playing it on the TV. I had the files, which I combined at home into one big file of 3 occasions where you could clearly see his face and the face of the woman driving the car, who I assume is his wife, and how they're clearly stealing the product from the store. Eliza and the big bosses were already there at the restaurant, so the sensible thing to do would be for me to say, "Excuse me, Eliza," and then brazenly interrupt her meeting with my cell phone video held up to her face. But I love a bit of drama, and Steve had this coming. So I see Eliza with her colleagues sitting at a table near the registers where Steve is standing with a giant kiss-ass grin on his face. The store isn't really crowded. Eliza sees me when I come in and, in full I love my staff mode, says, "Oh everyone, here's Hope, one of our newest and best. She's gonna college for computing," followed by a bunch of nods and oohs and uhs, pretending to give a rat's ass. I smile and mouth the words, "I'm just here to get my tips." "Oh, of course, Hope," and Steve looks like he wants to slap me, but too bad. "I'm going into the back room, you jerkwad." Our tips are placed in little baggies labeled with the amounts in our cubbies in the back room with an honor system, not to go grabbing anyone else's tips. I grab my tips, which is $150, which is not bad, but I go straight for the computer. I have my phone's USB cable, and I plug it into the USB port of the store computer. I upload the file as planned. I unclip the propaganda channel for Seattle's Finest and switch it to Steve the Thief and set the video for a continuous loop. I came out into the restaurant and as usual, no one really cares about the TV. I go to Steve and order a hot latte. Steve looks like he doesn't want me there at all, but he still has a grin on his face because the bosses are there. He doesn't know that just a few feet above his head there's a continuous loop of him and his wife stealing product in the alley every morning. I had made sure to include a time and date stamp on the videos when editing. He already had some hot milk ready, and all he had to do was put in 2 espresso shots. I had my drink in 30 seconds. I pulled out my wallet, but uncharacteristically, he smiled at me and waved me off. Eliza saw me and nodded in approval. Then I sat at a table not far from where the bosses were sitting, above Steve's head. His video was playing silently. I sat and watched my masterful creation like it was a big movie premiere starring Steve with a giant grin on my face. It didn't take long until one of the bosses said, "Eliza, that isn't our company video playing on the TV." "What's that?" Eliza looks at the video. Everyone else looks at the video. Mouths gape. Only Steve is still standing at the register smiling and grinning like a ninny. He hasn't turned around to look at the TV above his head yet. Finally, Eliza says, "Steve, can you explain what's going on here?" Steve looks at the video and looked for a second like he was going to implode. He didn't say or do anything other than go into the back room. Seconds later, the video stopped, and a few moments later, it began playing again. "Steve, I got you again. See, I deleted the corrected video on the computer and made a duplicate of your video and renamed it as if it were the original video. So everyone in the dining room was once again treated to a loop of Steven and his wife stealing entire crates of designer granola bars and pastries repeatedly. One of the bosses said, "Eliza, let's close the store right now. We need to deal with this." He pointed me to the door, and who am I to argue, sir? I happily walked home with my $11.50, but it felt like $1,000,000. A couple of days later, I get a call from corporate thanking me for the information about Steve. And anyways, as thanks, a week later, I received $1,200 in store credit. A few days later, I come in to find neither Eliza nor Steve at the restaurant. One of my coworkers told me that she heard that Steve was arrested for theft and charged on top of being immediately fired. Eliza got her promotion because it was proven that the only reason her store had moderately high shrinkage was because Steve was stealing. However, because she was supposed to be keeping a close eye on Steve, she's being watched carefully to ensure she's actually a good employee. Well, that's fair. She wasn't a thief, but she should have kept a closer watch on her store. As for me, the new manager got my final check because I quit. As time went on and I graduated school, I did eventually learn that Steve was not only stealing product, but he was also embezzling tips and tampering with the time clock to reduce people's hours and to give himself more. He went to jail for 6 years, but his wife got a suspended sentence because they had 2 children under the age of 13. I learned this because the company I worked for did tech service for Seattle's finest corporate office, where Eliza now works. She remembered me, and over the finest coffee in Seattle, she told me the whole story. Now on to the next story. Story 3. Bachelorette party in Italy goes horribly wrong after ignoring safety concerns and gets warning about creepy men. I, 24F, have a friend, 32F, who got engaged and decided to do a girls' trip as her bachelorette party. She picked Italy and there were 6 of us on this trip. My friend loves to drink and party, whereas I don't drink but will indulge on occasion like special events and celebrations. During this trip, I tried to participate in the drinking as best as I could. I'm a very bubbly and extroverted person when I'm in a group setting, so who I am sober versus drunk, it's the same energy. I have tried to express this to my friend for years, but she is still someone who gets sad when other people don't drink as much as her. It is also physically impossible for me to drink as much as her. I just can't, but I tried really hard for my friend on this trip to indulge her. I wanted her to feel happy. I share this to express that I went in with the best intentions, but here is where I drew the line. We met some young people, they invited us to a party, we went and danced and met more people. The night kept going on longer and we were very far from our lodgings. These young men with 2 women in their group told us to stay with them for the night. I wasn't feeling the situation, it felt unsafe, but the group voted and I was in the minority. They were all quite inebriated and it was hard to be the only sober person trying to get them to reconsider and get a cab and go to our lodgings. I didn't trust these men. Something seemed wrong. But I was at a loss as I could not split from my group and didn't feel safe separating from them in the middle of the night. We go to this house and settle in. In the middle of the night, I hear attempts being made to enter our room. The men entered even though we had locked the doors. I pretended to be asleep and the men were talking in Italian, but it felt like they were checking on us and wanting to do something. They were quarreling with each other, going back and forth. It seemed they ultimately left to argue outside. I didn't sleep the whole night. I texted my boyfriend and told him what was happening and how I felt unsafe. Next morning, the group of girls I'm with decides we are going to stay another day because these men have offered to show us around. I didn't want to get into a car with them because I found them creepy. There were women in their group, but it didn't matter, they seemed even more suspicious to me, being overly friendly. The whole morning I found the men staring at me a lot and also making some comments about my ethnicity. I am Korean and they could tell, and it seemed that they were interested in me because of my ethnicity, asking me strange questions including if I'm a virgin or not. So in my head, I could only think of perverted reasons for these questions because I thought these guys were sketchy and sizing us all up for some reason I couldn't figure out yet. My friend said I was having a language barrier issue and I probably misunderstood. They were liking the attention of these affluent-seeming guys who were going to get us on a yacht. My suspicions and concerns went unheard. I talked to my boyfriend in France and he said he could come get me, and he did. I left the trip because I felt uncomfortable and unsafe. I tried to communicate all this to my friend, but she didn't feel the same, so I did what I had to do for myself. The men were saying they will drive us to get our things from the hotel and we can stay with them instead, and the girls were considering it. I left 4 days prematurely. The girls eventually came back and told me how creepy and scary the men became and that I was right. The friend, however, 32F, whose bachelorette it was, is mad at me for leaving. Edit. Just want to add my boyfriend offered to drive them to our booked hotel, and I urged them to follow the planned itinerary. We even found a legit company who did yacht services, and my boyfriend offered to gift my friend by paying, but she and the others wanted to go with that group of men. Comments where OP has replied. Comment 1. NTA is your safety and well-being is key. You repeatedly tried to get them not to go, they ignored you. But YTA if you're an AI or this story is the plot of a bad horror movie. OP. No, just want to clarify that fortunately nothing happened to my friends. They are all safe and I kept up communication with them, including making them give me all their locations so I could track them on my iPhone with Find My. I didn't sleep right until they left the creepy dudes, but I'm glad nothing happened. Could have been much worse and I'm so glad it was not. Comment 2. NTA do whatever you need to feel safe. Your friend is very selfish. She sounds like a just me, everything is about her and what makes her happy. OP. I understand it was her bachelorette trip, so to some extent it is supposed to be all about her. But you are right, she can be a little self-centered, which is what I was trying to explain with the drinking. That the same mindset applies to everything, and I feel that's why she is mad at me, because she cannot see my discomfort or limitations might vary from her own. I feel bad for leaving, but I'm not sure how I could have stayed. It was difficult to weigh the responsibility of remaining a part of this trip and experience versus feeling safe. Update. I did not expect such an overwhelming response on that post. I wrote it in part to vent because I felt some members of the bridal party are unfairly upset with me. I am no longer part of the group chat and I was supposed to be singing a song for the couple at this wedding, which I am sure won't be happening either. That's okay. At this point, I do not want to attend. Seems like a sign that I should no longer be friends with the bride 32F and another friend from this group and maybe even the rest of them. Still hurts though. I guess that's normal. I also want to express this can happen anywhere in the world. I do not mean to claim Italy is unsafe, rather that situations can be unsafe anywhere, especially when people get caught up and choose to stop being aware of their surroundings. When I was living at a model house, I witnessed a lot of manipulation, and part of my vigilance is due to the experience I had. To have it fall on deaf ears was extremely disheartening, but I learned from this experience now too. On my post, I also received several comments requesting more information, so I will answer it here as part of the update. If I missed your question, I'm really sorry. 1. Did I tell the girls the men had entered our room at night? Yes. I tried to wake up the girl next to me to alert her after the two men went outside to argue. She was still too inebriated. All the girls were wasted, and although I felt sober and lucid, I also had some alcohol, so I texted the group chat and said we need to urgently talk when everyone is up. I didn't sleep all night. I stayed in this hyper-alert state. When the girls woke, I explained what happened in the night along with my concerns. A few girls seemed to consider this, but the bride-to-be and another girl began to persuade everyone I was simply overreacting. They asserted that because nothing happened, it was my personal paranoia at best. They tried to explain away the incident of the men entering the room to be that perhaps one of them was unhappy to give the room to us. They said everyone was drunk and tired, and as such people become cranky. This conversation got cut short when a woman from the Italian group entered the room. We had no alone time after this, so I continued to persist in the group chat. The only thing I kept from the girls in my group was that my boyfriend was currently on his way. It's a few hours drive. I chose to keep this a secret because I did not want the girls to mention it to the Italian group. I felt it would cause a problem in the worst-case scenario. 2. Is the bride to be a cheater? I don't feel comfortable writing about her in detail, but she did not have sex with the men to my knowledge, and I don't think it was her intention at all. But I do feel that she and a few other girls did want to take advantage of this trip to have some kind of spontaneous adventure. They wanted a story to tell and to have some kind of wild experience which 100% involved flirting with men for the thrill of it. This mentality quickly made following the planned itinerary boring in this new situation that presented itself more exciting. All the other girls in the group are single except myself, one other girl, and the bride, so I think that contributed. The bride-to-be and her best friend who kept disagreeing with me alongside her loved to party. Her fiancé is the same. They are constantly partying together, going to raves and concerts and festivals all over the world. It was also for this reason they kept trying to overrule me. They deemed themselves more experienced travelers. Even before this trip, I've always been labeled the baby of the group. Despite this label, I am not clueless. It also takes more to impress me, so I don't give a reaction easily or get swept up by charitable gestures. These gestures really made the girls become careless. I am spirited and friendly to people I know, but naturally skeptical of strangers. I don't have a loud voice, but I am vocal and will speak my mind, whereas some of the other girls are more quiet followers who say things that they know will be in alignment with the group. The bride and her best friend were louder and very wrong, but their loudness and the conviction with which they projected their opinion bulldozed me, especially when no one else would take my side. There was a major, that only happens in movies, this would never happen to us, type mentality going on that didn't work in my favor. This mixed with the high of alcohol, drugs, and the runaway train that was the mentality of the girls on this trip, it got really hard to talk sense into any of them. My boyfriend met me at a store when I left with a girl from the Italian group on a supply run. It felt like a red flag to me that they always wanted to accompany us. My boyfriend arrived and I told the Italian woman I am going home. My boyfriend had me call the bride-to-be. He said he will take them all back to the hotel. He even offered to help arrange a boat if that's what was keeping her here. She told him he is controlling and she feels bad for me. She refused everything he graciously offered and asked for me to be put on the phone. Then she yelled at me for having done this behind her back and for spoiling the mood of the trip and the memory for her. The conversation was going nowhere. She told me to essentially EF off. I was fed up at this point and feeling unwell from lack of sleep. My boyfriend went back on the phone with the bride and made her put him on speaker and then told them all to share their location with my phone. The bride refused, but everyone else did it. The girls went later with the women from the Italian group back to the hotel to get their things and relocate to the villa. 3. After the trip, most of the girls informed me I was right, excluding bride-to-be and one other girl. This is what happened. The men started to get more sexual on the boat in the evening, but not before trying to get everyone extremely intoxicated. It wasn't a kidnapping scheme, I think. It seems they just wanted to get sex in return for all the free favors they had provided and became more aggressive and demanding about it. No one was sexually assaulted to my knowledge, but it seems like the men were quite persistent, so the line is blurry. Also, I learned one of the girls did have sex with one of the guys. The bride-to-be's best friend, who was the girl that kept siding with her. She had sex with one of the men the first night, and that's probably why she was so adamant to stay. They continued their fling, but the other girls became sour to the experience and asked to leave by the end of the night. They had to check back into a different hotel. What a mess. The bride-to-be is angry that I abandoned the group and that I left too suddenly without thinking about it. She says I have shown I am not a person who sticks with her through thick and thin. In my defense, I tried my best to express my feelings, but they went on unheard, so the only choice I had was to leave because in all honesty I refused to risk my own safety. I also did not want to get into too much detail for sake of length, but the men made me uncomfortable for several reasons, and I think I have the right to not be subjected to unwanted attention. Despite all my calm attempts to reason, the bride-to-be doesn't understand my side. She believes I overreacted for nothing. I'm not sure if the other girls are trying to persuade her to understand me or if they're all in agreement with her. I think I am just done defending myself. I refuse to beg for this friendship. I kind of want to just move on quietly. What transpired speaks volumes by itself. For background, I have known the bride-to-be for years, and the time span is the main reason we stay friends. We don't see each other all the time though, and can go months and months without interaction. I have many other friend groups, but the history we share keeps us together. Over the years she doesn't seem to have grown at all, so maybe it's time to go separate ways. Comments where OP has replied. Comment 1. NTA chills that could have gone so differently. Did they not see the last season of White Lotus? Thank goodness you got yourself out of there and agree that boyfriend is a rock star and gets full marks. Ditch these vermin pretending to be your friends. OP. Ironically, I've also not watched any of White Lotus, but I see it mentioned here on my post a few times. I think I need to watch it myself. I only chose to come on the trip with these girls after reviewing the itinerary because I knew what kind of travelers they are. I guess getting engaged to be married didn't change anything. In hindsight, I may be a little naive for thinking it would. Thank you so much for reading my post. I hope it helps someone like me in the future or makes girls aware that you can never be too cautious. I'm grateful and extremely lucky by happenstance that my boyfriend was around as he was also going to attend this wedding. It's much more difficult when you have a long flight to take to get to your person. Additional info. I was just saying to another user in a comment that looking back on it, I think it was naive of me to expect this group to not do something like this given their past travel history. I made an assumption based on the itinerary and the fact that she was getting married that this trip would be a different vibe. It wasn't, and I'm just lucky my BF was also going to be attending this wedding, so he was nearby to come get me. And you are so right, it should have never been about voting on whether my feelings, discomfort and concerns mattered. They should have been taken into consideration. There was a lot of evidence to, at the very least, paint the picture that these men were making aggressive unwanted advances which could escalate and that we shouldn't entertain their type of company. The fiancé is also my friend and he did ask for my side of the events after she told him hers. He did not see anything wrong with my decision and felt it was a bad idea what they decided to do, but he is somewhat like her and that he's very much a carefree partier also. The girls and the bride all shared their side of the story first, so I think it influenced the narrative a lot. He has told me he has spoken to the bride about what happened. Then she reached out and asked me to attend the wedding, but there was no apology. She didn't address anything or discuss it. Felt very much like she was deciding to let me back in, and so I decided her re-inviting me to her wedding wasn't enough. I told her I am not coming. I was supposed to sing at her wedding, but I'm no professional. It was more of a little gesture for the bride and groom as my friends. Not something that would be missed if it didn't happen. I don't think my absence will be felt much in the sense of the program, so I don't feel bad about not going to the wedding. I don't think my conscience would allow me to even sing for her without feeling like a clown after everything that went down. She's been indirectly posting passive-aggressively, meme quote reels and stuff about friendships and loyalty that I know is a dig at me on her stories. The friendship is over and the way she is acting only makes it easier to be okay with that. She always has to prove she's right or explain her way out of something when she's wrong. She'll never acknowledge anything other than her perspective. I somehow got through all these years of our friendship never having ruffled her feathers, but this one time we weren't on the same page for valid reasons. It really showed me how ignorant and self-centered she is. Now on to the next story. Story 4. I'm Chinese, and I have a strict, traditional mother. I'm now dating a black man, and she wants to disown me. I am going to try to keep this as short as possible. I need some of the tolerant people here to read about my situation. I am Asian American, Chinese, to be more specific, female, 25 years old. If you have heard about those stereotypes about how strict and traditional Asian parents are, well, you can imagine my mother. She is the perfect example of it. I have had a few problems with my mother in the past. To put it simply, we think differently, but she will always be my mom, and I will always respect her. My father passed away some years ago, and since then, actually, our mother-daughter relationship was very good for like a year. Maybe after that year was over, our old conflicts and the old arguments came back. But for the most part, our relationship was still good, even though I was almost an adult. I have to be honest and say that my mother became more controlling, like a helicopter parent. It is like we live in different worlds. She is more traditional, she lives stuck in the past, and I live here in the present moment. Recently, I have had a few dates with an African-American man. Just in case someone I know in real life reads this right now or in the future, I will call him David here. I like him, we get along well. I am sure we will keep seeing each other. You may not see it as a problem, but I know that it is for my mother. See, my mom will only accept a Chinese guy as my boyfriend. It does not matter how successful he is. If he is not Chinese, she will hate him, and I am afraid she would hate me too. I am confused about what I should do right now. I do not want to tell my mom about him, not yet. On the other hand, I feel like I am becoming too paranoid. Every time we go out, I get stressed and think, what happens if someone recognizes me and tells my mom? That would only make things worse, and at the same time, it is not fair to him. I am already out of college, while David is 26 years old and just started trade school, so that is also something my mom would not like. I cannot imagine telling my mom I am dating a black man. I can see her completely losing her mind, and I do not know how much I can do to change her opinion. My dad had a clear vision of what my future should look like, and I am afraid my mother would use my dead father to persuade me to stop seeing David. I do not want to disappoint my mother, but I visit her several times a week. I talk with her every day. I do not want my mom to feel lonely. I am her only child, after all, and we do not have too many family members in the country. But if I were to ask her for a little bit more freedom, she would find it disrespectful. The bitterness between us would come back, so I am afraid of what I should do now. I do not know if we should watch a TV show with interracial couples just to see how bad she can react. I do not know. Update 1. 1 month ago, I told my mother about me and David. I kept thinking about it. Some of you told me to just do it because she was going to hate me anyway. You can imagine she was not happy. I went to her place. I made sure she was sitting down, and a few moments later, I confessed I was dating David. My mom was dead silent at first, then she exploded. I never expected anything less. She asked me if I was joking. When I said no, well, to sum it all up, she basically said I am a traitor and I am bringing dishonor upon our family. I said before that I was afraid my mother would use my father and his death against me. Yes, that is exactly what she did. She repeated, "Think about your father and everything he did for you," several times. Later that night I cried a lot. I still feel really bad, but I also think that is exactly how my mom wants me to feel. Just like all of you who answered my first post, my friends tell me the same thing. That I should ignore my mother's wishes and focus on myself and my relationship, regardless of my mother's bigoted way of thinking. Yeah, I have thought about it, but even if I have the support of my friends, I cannot forget my mother. I really want her to be part of my life and to feel proud of me. I have visited my mother a few times, and she still called me, but she treats me very coldly. I have asked her about her feelings and if she has changed her mind, but her answers are not positive. In the last 2 weeks, if I try to tell her about David, my mom just tells me that she is going to ignore my relationship, as she hopes David and I will break up soon. She seems really sure of it. When I expressed my desire and the possibility of the three of us going out to dinner, my mother asked me if I wanted to shame her in public. Following the failed invitation, it seems I gave my mom a new idea because she now constantly harasses me with text messages saying things such as, "Don't post pictures of you with him on the internet," or, "Are you sure you want to be around people while you hold hands with a non-Chinese man?" Something like this happened too when I was around 12, and I befriended a normal white girl. She is very weary of basically everyone that does not have the same ethnic background as us. I've been really sad lately. It has been years, but I still cannot believe she has not changed a bit. She does not realize her behavior has been very detrimental to me and our relationship. David and I went out more. He was by my side at my best friend's birthday party. I can say we are an official couple now. However, until a few days ago, he did not know the fact that my mother does not want me to be his girlfriend. I kept it secret because I do not want to hurt his feelings. And the thing is, I am still with him even though my mom does not want us to be together. Isn't that enough evidence that I am choosing him over my own mother? Whatever. He got really upset with me. He gave me the silent treatment for 2 days, our first fight. There is an elephant in the room now. He can't say why he is angry. Update 2. So, almost 3 months have passed since the last post. After all of you who have given me words full of courage and useful advice, I wish I could bring you good news, but unfortunately, it is not the case, at least not for now. I remain hopeful. I really hope things will change for the better sooner than later. I think 6 weeks ago, my mother broke her own promise and stopped ignoring my relationship. Since then, she tells me, "Oh, I love you. Can you please stop the pain and forget that man for good?" Something along those lines once per week without fail. I did my best to put myself first. I love my work, so most of my time, my energy is on it. I tried my best to set boundaries with my mother. We spent a whole day together talking about my childhood, all the good and the bad of our entire lives, and at the end of the day I told her I need to live my life, that I got a college degree and a nice job. I am a functional adult capable of making sound decisions, and that she could not be a helicopter mother anymore if she wanted me to be present in her life. My mom acted like she understood my feelings and was about to try to change some of her behaviors or bad attitudes toward the modern world. But no, it did not happen. I have to add something else. David and I went to more places together. Great, everything seemed to be okay. But I realized we always go out with my friends. I have never met any of his friends or family members, and apparently he never intended to. When I mentioned this one day, he got very angry out of the blue. Just one little question. I thought it was a harmless question. He screamed at me. I was scared. He brushed it off, saying I did not need to, and I can't say other words because he basically lectured me for asking something basic. After that incident, we have had a few more arguments. Unfortunately, David has anger issues. I am trying to be supportive, and I have stopped asking him to go as a couple and get lunch with some of his friends. He repeats the same line. I am not ready to talk about it. Going back to my mother now, she has taken refuge in social media. I was not aware of it until my best friend told me about it. My mom is sharing these quotes about the different sacrifices the parents make to give a good life to their children. How hard it is to raise good children. Posts about how to be grateful or how to be strong when children do not listen and do not do what the parents want them to do. I was shocked, and I am still shocked. All of those posts were indirectly directed at me. I feel offended. I cannot believe my mother is complaining on social media. She got comments from one of my aunts, some cousins, and old friends. She won because when I read all of that, I felt ashamed, and I can see clearly now she is shameless, airing her dirty laundry in public. If my mom has a problem with my decisions in life, I do not understand why she has to involve family and acquaintances. At the end of the day, I know I am not hurting anyone. If my mother is unwilling to accept new ideas, that is her problem. Maybe I am unlucky. I genuinely wanted my mother to get along with my boyfriend. Things being what they are, I would just implore her to leave us alone and to stop embarrassing herself on the internet. Although I think she is enjoying the attention she is getting, and I am well aware she will not leave us alone. These days, she lives in order to criticize my relationship. I will not talk to her anymore unless she apologizes for everything and drops the drama for good. I can't deal with it. I am tired. Update 3. Hello. I am here again after a month. I am happy to report to all of you that my mother has been quiet about David and our relationship lately. She has not apologized. I am sure that is too much for her. I did not call her, and if she called me, I did not answer any of her calls. My phone was ringing 3 to 4 times every day. This went on for a week or so. She texted me too. Most of them were just about her day and asking about how I was doing. Fortunately, I did not get the usual accusations of me being a traitor or what I think is her favorite line. You need to do better. I did what I said I was going to do. Not even one visit to my mom's house these last 4 weeks. Unfortunately, my mother, the drama queen, still shares her thoughts about me with the internet. These days, her posts are getting worse because she is now sharing private things that happened between us and some of the stuff I said and did when I was a teenager. At the end of one of them, she wrote, I should have known back then this was not right. I let it pass, and now it is time to pay the price of my lazy parenting. I do not think I will ever forgive all of these posts, not only sharing silly things I did in the past as a child, but also all her attempts to frame me as a horrible daughter. After 2 weeks without seeing each other, my mother came to my place one Saturday morning. We had a conversation. She did not scream at me, which was something good, but she was still angry and showed it. You do not answer my calls. How dare you? You know I live alone. What are you going to do if something bad happens to me and I end up in the hospital? And because you are full of yourself and throwing a tantrum, you do not hear about me, she told me. At this point, I will accept her actions and do my best to move on. I am conscious I should not disclose my problems and private life with her anymore, seeing that she will write about it the next day on Facebook. I found out something else about my boyfriend's family. Turns out my mother and his family have a lot in common. David's parents do not want me to be his girlfriend either, and his friends do not like me either. Please, just for the record, remember I have never met any of his friends or family. How did I find out? We also had an argument, but at least he ended up telling me the truth afterward. We were in a restaurant, and David and I bumped into 2 of his friends. They saw me and immediately said very insensitive things about my appearance. According to them, my boyfriend included it was just a joke. Let me tell you, it was not the only joke about my appearance and our relationship they made in those 10 minutes. The 3 of them were together laughing while I was standing there. I thought David was going to tell them to stop after the first or the second joke. But no, he did nothing. I remained silent. I felt extremely disrespected by his 2 friends, and I guess I also felt let down or betrayed by David. Later, we had a long conversation. Worst of all, he was angry with me for not laughing at his friends' jokes. He seriously thought there was nothing wrong with them and even told me I was overreacting. I could not believe my ears. My boyfriend completely dismissed my feelings. I will not write the jokes here. I do not want to repeat any of it. Actually, I wish I could erase it from my memory, but I am just going to say they were obscene, and my ethnicity was involved. I am so embarrassed that even my best friend has not heard about this incident. Later on, I decided to press him on about his parents. He confessed his parents were not happy when he announced our relationship to them. Now I understand why he got angry every time I told him I wanted to meet his parents or friends. I have mixed feelings. David does not care about any of the comments made by his family and friends. He still talks with them as if nothing had happened. I was expecting him to feel at least a little bit uncomfortable or that he would stand up and defend our relationship. And here I am. I barely talk with my mother now because I strongly believe she is being disrespectful toward my boyfriend. I am confused, and I do not know what I should do. Update 4. It's been a couple of months since I wrote here. I think this is going to be my last chapter, and then I will move on. Where do I start? My mother was sharing my private life for the internet to see. We barely talked to each other, and if we did, we would treat each other coldly. My boyfriend did not bother to stand up for me when I was being disrespected. That incident made me feel worthless. I felt confused and angry. My mental health was not good at all. I could not talk with anybody. My friends, or the people I thought were my friends, said they were tired of my complaints, so I had no one around me willing to listen. Things got worse with my mom. My uncle called me. I thought I got scared for a second. Maybe some family member had died. Nobody died, fortunately, but that call almost killed me. He basically scolded me for being a bad daughter. He told me I am rebellious and that I should treat my mother better. The call lasted around 20 minutes, and in those minutes, he tried to organize my life, telling me how I am supposed to live and even had the nerve to say that I was born to make my mother happy. He had seen all the social media posts written by my mother. His comments made my blood boil. I ended the call and went that same day to my mom's place. When I arrived at my mom's neighborhood, an old Chinese lady greets me. I know her. She is friends with my mother. This woman looks at me and tells me straight to my face, "You should be grateful your mother loves you so much. She is suffering because of you." The last thing she said to me is that I was disgusting. I tried my best to not scream at her. Nevertheless, I was very rude, but I wanted to be left alone. Then my uncle called, and after I encountered this old lady, a stranger to me, both of them already siding with my mother, both of them trying to fix my personal life, I got upset. Looking back, I am not proud of the things I said to this old lady. A few minutes later, my mother and I had a shouting match. She seriously thought that if she shared the details of my private life with people on the internet and people who knew me, I would have a change of heart. I would become the daughter she wanted. My mother, till this day, sees herself as a victim. Of course, I am the perpetrator, the dirty daughter. The good things I have done are completely forgotten, according to my mother. David is as evil as the devil. Thanks for all of you who were rooting for me and David. Unfortunately, we are no longer together. You may say my mother won, but in reality, we barely talk to each other after our last fight. I do not think she wants to see me for the time being. I decided to break up with him for other reasons. The fact he laughed about those comments made by his friends was one of them. I did explain why those words hurt me. "You are acting irrationally," he told me. I thought deeply about it. His family shared my mom's idea that the two of us were not a good couple. Maybe this relationship was destined to be a mess. For now, I think I am better alone. My well-being is my main focus. You can be sure as hell I have learned my lesson. If anything, I am keeping my life as private as I can. The most important thing, the best, is that I got rid of the unhealthy relationship I had with my mother. I feel less anxious now. I got to give credit to David. If it was not for him, I would still be making excuses to not think about the controlling nature of my mom. She will always be my mother, but I need to be far away from her for at least 2 years. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My abusive stepbrother tried to steal my inheritance after our parents' death. When he broke into my apartment, I took him to court. I, 32F, never thought I'd be dealing with family drama like this at my age. But here I am, caught in the middle of an inheritance battle with my stepbrother, Johnny, 29M, after our parents' sudden death in a car accident 2 months ago. My mom passed away when I was 10 from breast cancer. It was a long, painful battle that took its toll on our entire family. I remember spending countless hours in hospital waiting rooms, watching my mom slowly fade away. After she died, it was just me and my dad for a few years. We were incredibly close during that time, leaning on each other for support as we navigated our grief. When I was 14, my dad met Simone at a grief support group. They bonded over their shared experiences. Simone had lost her husband to a heart attack a few years prior. They got married a year later, and suddenly I had a new stepmom and stepbrother. Johnny was 12 at the time and, to be honest, a total nightmare from day one. I tried to be welcoming to Johnny at first. I remembered how lonely I felt after losing my mom and thought maybe he was acting out because of his own grief. But it quickly became clear that Johnny's issues ran deeper than that. Growing up, Johnny was always causing trouble. He'd break my things, invade my privacy, and make my life miserable whenever he could. I remember one incident when I was 15. I had just gotten my first diary, a gift from my dad. I came home from school one day to find that Johnny had not only read it but had torn out pages and scribbled crude drawings all over it. When I confronted him, he just laughed and said I shouldn't have secrets in our family. My dad and Simone tried to intervene, but nothing seemed to work. They sent Johnny to counseling, tried different disciplinary methods, but he always found a way to manipulate the situation. As we got older, Johnny's behavior only escalated. He started getting into drugs and alcohol in high school, and there were times when he'd come home drunk and verbally abuse me. One night stands out in my memory. I was 17, studying for a big exam in my room. Johnny came home wasted, kicked open my door, and started screaming at me about how I thought I was so much better than him. He knocked over my bookshelf and threatened to hit me before my dad finally managed to restrain him. The next day, Johnny acted like nothing had happened, and Simone convinced my dad not to punish him because he was going through a phase. I tried to keep the peace for my dad's sake, but it was a constant struggle. I felt like I was walking on eggshells in my own home, never knowing when Johnny might explode next. It took a toll on my mental health, and I started experiencing anxiety and panic attacks. I moved out as soon as I turned 18 to get away from the toxic environment. Even though I was living on my own, I stayed close to my dad. We had weekly dinners together, just the two of us, to maintain our bond. During these dinners, my dad would often express his concerns about Johnny's behavior and his addiction issues. He confided in me that he was worried about Johnny's future and how he might handle any inheritance. I remember one conversation vividly. It was about a year ago, and my dad looked particularly tired. He told me that Johnny had been arrested for drug possession but that Simone had bailed him out. My dad was torn between wanting to help his stepson and fearing that he was enabling destructive behavior. He mentioned that he was thinking of changing his will to protect the family assets from Johnny's addiction, but he was worried about how Simone would react. Fast forward to 2 months ago. I got the call that changed everything. My dad and Simone had been in a terrible car accident on their way home from a weekend getaway. They were both killed instantly. The shock and grief were overwhelming. Despite our difficult relationship, I reached out to Johnny, thinking we could at least support each other during this difficult time. But Johnny had other plans. Within days of the funeral, he started harassing me about the inheritance. He claimed that since he was the real son, he's my stepbrother, but whatever, he deserved everything. He started showing up at my apartment unannounced, leaving threatening voicemails, and even tried to break in once when I wasn't home. I later found out that Johnny's uncle, his mom's older brother, was behind a lot of this. Uncle Dave has always been bad news. He's got a criminal record and has been in and out of jail. I remember meeting him at Simone and my dad's wedding. He spent the entire reception trying to scam money out of the other guests. Apparently, he's been filling Johnny's head with all sorts of ideas about how to get the inheritance. Things came to a head last week when Johnny cornered me outside my workplace. He was clearly high on something and started screaming about how he'd make me sorry if I didn't sign over my share of the inheritance. He even took a swing at me, but luckily a coworker intervened before things got worse. As he was being pulled away, Johnny shouted that he knew where I lived and that I'd better watch my back. I'm at my wit's end. I've been trying to live peacefully and grieve for my dad and Simone, but Johnny won't let up. I don't want to cave to his demands. My dad worked hard for what he had, and I know he wouldn't want Johnny to blow it all on drugs. Plus, I have my own future to think about. I've been saving up to go back to school and finish my degree, something my dad always encouraged me to do. I've decided to fight back. I've reached out to my Uncle Rob, my dad's brother, for help. Uncle Rob has always been a supportive presence in my life. When my mom died, he practically moved in with us for a few months to help my dad cope and make sure I was taken care of. He never quite approved of Simone, feeling that she and my dad rushed into marriage, but he always tried to be polite for the family's sake. Uncle Rob has offered to help me navigate the legal side of things. We're going to contest Johnny's claims in court and make sure my dad's wishes are respected. Uncle Rob has also insisted on staying with me for a while, worried about my safety given Johnny's threats. I feel guilty for having to fight with family like this, especially so soon after losing my dad and Simone, but I also know I can't let Johnny bully me into giving up what's rightfully mine. I'm scared of what he might do next, but I'm trying to stay strong. There are moments when I find myself thinking back to when Johnny first came into our lives. He was just a scared kid who'd lost his dad. Same as me. I wonder if things could have been different if we'd connected over our shared loss instead of becoming adversaries. But then I remember all the years of abuse and manipulation, and I know I can't let those fleeting moments of sympathy cloud my judgment. Has anyone else dealt with inheritance drama like this? Any advice on how to handle an abusive family member during a time like this? I could really use some support right now. I'm trying to stay strong, but between the grief of losing my dad and the stress of dealing with Johnny, I feel like I'm barely keeping it together. Date 1. It's been about a month since my last post, and a lot has happened. Thank you all for your supportive comments and messages. They've really helped me stay strong through this difficult time. First, the legal battle has officially begun. Uncle Rob helped me find a great lawyer who specializes in estate disputes. We filed the necessary paperwork to contest Johnny's claims on the inheritance. The initial hearing is scheduled for next month. Going through this process has brought up a lot of memories about my dad. I remember how hard he worked to provide for us, especially after my mom died. He took on extra classes at the community college where he taught, often coming home late at night exhausted, but always making time to ask about my day or help with my homework. It breaks my heart to think of Johnny potentially squandering everything my dad worked for. In the meantime, Johnny's behavior has gotten even worse. He's been spreading lies about me to our extended family and mutual friends. He's telling everyone that I'm trying to cheat him out of his rightful inheritance and that I never cared about our parents. It's been really hurtful to hear these things, especially from people I thought knew me better. One of my cousins called me last week, upset after talking to Johnny. Apparently, he told her that I had been stealing money from my dad for years, and that I had threatened to put him in a nursing home if he didn't change his will in my favor. It's complete nonsense, of course, but it's devastating to think that some family members might believe these lies. I've had to block Johnny's number and all his social media accounts because of the constant harassment. He's been leaving notes on my car and in my mailbox, alternating between threats and pleas for me to do the right thing and give him the money. Some of the notes are clearly written while he's high, full of rambling accusations and barely legible handwriting. The most shocking development came last week when Johnny actually broke into my apartment. I came home from work to find my place trashed. He had gone through all my personal papers, clearly looking for anything related to the inheritance. He also stole my laptop, which had copies of some important documents. Luckily, I had backups of everything stored securely online. What hurt the most was seeing the damage he'd done to some of my family photos. There was one picture of me, my dad, and my mom at the beach when I was little, one of the last family vacations we took before she got sick. Johnny had scribbled all over my face in the photo. It felt like he was trying to erase me from the family history. I called the police immediately and filed a report. They took fingerprints and gathered evidence, but Johnny hasn't been arrested yet. The officer I spoke to suggested I get a restraining order, which I'm in the process of doing now. It feels surreal to be taking legal action against someone I once considered family, but I know it's necessary for my safety. This whole situation has brought up a lot of old memories and feelings. I've been thinking a lot about my childhood and the dynamics in our blended family. There were good times, sure, but Johnny's presence always cast a shadow. I remember one particular incident when I was 16 and Johnny was 14. We were home alone after school, and I caught him trying to steal money from my dad's desk. When I confronted him, he flew into a rage. He pushed me down the stairs, and I ended up with a broken arm. Johnny convinced our parents it was an accident, and I was too scared to tell the truth. I can still remember the pain and betrayal I felt lying in the hospital bed, listening to Simone praise Johnny for being so brave in calling the ambulance for me. That incident was a turning point for me. I realized then that Johnny wasn't just a troubled kid. He was dangerous. I started keeping my distance as much as possible, which only seemed to fuel his resentment towards me. Despite all this, my dad always tried to keep the peace. He loved us both and wanted us to be a family. I know it broke his heart that we couldn't get along. In his final years, he confided in me that he was worried about what would happen to Johnny after he was gone. He knew Johnny's drug problems were getting worse, and he was torn between wanting to provide for him and fearing that any inheritance would just fuel his addiction. I've been going through my dad's papers, and I found some notes he'd made about his will. It's clear he was planning to set up a trust for Johnny with strict conditions about rehab and staying clean, but he passed away before he could finalize everything. I'm hoping these notes will help our case in court. Uncle Rob has been an incredible support through all of this. He's been staying with me for the past week to help me feel safer. He's also been reaching out to other family members to counter Johnny's lies and explain our side of the story. It's been comforting to have him around. In many ways, he reminds me of my dad, and it's helped me feel connected to my family history in a positive way. I'm trying to stay focused on the legal process and not let Johnny's actions get to me, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared. I'm worried about what he might do next, especially with Uncle Dave egging him on. I've started having nightmares about Johnny breaking in while I'm sleeping or attacking me on the street. I'm looking into additional security measures for my apartment and considering moving to a new place that Johnny doesn't know about. It's frustrating to feel like I'm the one who has to uproot my life when I haven't done anything wrong. Despite everything, there are moments when I feel guilty. Johnny is still the little brother I once knew somewhere deep down. I remember when he first moved in, how excited he was to show me his comic book collection and how he wanted us to build a treehouse together. I wonder if things could have been different if we'd gotten him help earlier or if I tried harder to connect with him. But then I remind myself of all the pain he's caused and the way he's acting now, and I know I'm doing the right thing by standing my ground. I'll update again after the court hearing next month. Thanks again for all your support. It means more than you know. Update 2. Hey everyone. It's been a whirlwind few weeks since my last update, and I wanted to fill you all in on what's been happening. The court hearing finally happened, and it was intense. Johnny showed up with Uncle Dave and a sleazy-looking lawyer. They tried to paint me as the villain, claiming I had manipulated my dad into cutting Johnny out of the will. It was hard to sit there and listen to their lies, but my lawyer did an amazing job of presenting our case. We submitted the notes I found in my dad's papers about his plans for Johnny's inheritance. We also had testimony from my dad's financial advisor, who confirmed that my dad had discussed setting up a trust for Johnny with conditions about rehab. One of the most emotional moments came when my high school guidance counselor testified. She spoke about the times I had come to her upset and scared about Johnny's behavior at home. She also mentioned how my grades had suffered during that time due to the stress. It was validating to have someone else confirm the impact Johnny's actions had on me. The judge seemed to see through Johnny's act pretty quickly. She wasn't impressed by his erratic behavior in court or the fact that he showed up clearly under the influence of something. At one point, Johnny started yelling at me from across the courtroom, calling me a liar and threatening to make me pay. The judge had to threaten him with contempt of court to get him to calm down. In the end, the judge ruled largely in my favor. The bulk of the inheritance will come to me, with a smaller portion set aside in a trust for Johnny. The trust has strict conditions. He'll only get access to the money if he completes a rehab program and stays clean for a year. The judge also granted the restraining order I had requested, citing Johnny's threats and the break-in at my apartment. Johnny, of course, didn't take the news well. He started screaming in the courtroom and had to be restrained by security. As they were dragging him out, he kept yelling that this wasn't over and that he'd make me regret it. It was a sad sight, and even though I know I did the right thing, it was hard to see him like that. Since the hearing, things have calmed down a bit. Johnny seems to have finally gotten the message that his harassment won't work. The restraining order is in place, and he hasn't tried to contact me. I've heard through the grapevine that he's considering going to rehab to get access to his part of the inheritance. Part of me hopes he does. Maybe it could be the fresh start he needs, but I'm not holding my breath. I've started the process of sorting through my dad and Simone's things. It's been emotional but also healing in a way. I found old photos and mementos that bring back good memories from before things got so complicated with Johnny. There was one box full of my school art projects that my dad had kept all these years. Seeing how proud he was of my work, even the silly macaroni pictures from elementary school, brought tears to my eyes. I also found some of Johnny's old things, report cards, little league trophies, birthday cards he'd made for Simone. It was a stark reminder of the little boy he once was before drugs and anger took over. I set these aside, thinking maybe someday if he gets clean he might want them. Uncle Rob has been helping me make plans for the inheritance. We're looking into setting up a scholarship fund in my dad's name at the local community college where he taught for years. I think he would have liked that. We're also considering donating to a local rehab center in hopes that it might help other families avoid the pain we've gone through with Johnny's addiction. I'm still processing everything that's happened, and I know it will take time to fully heal from this experience. Some days are harder than others. I'll catch myself reaching for the phone to call my dad and share some news, only to remember he's gone. The grief hits me in waves, compounded by the stress of the legal battle and Johnny's actions. I've started seeing a therapist to help me work through everything. It's been helpful to have a space to talk about my complicated feelings towards Johnny and my fears for the future. My therapist has been encouraging me to focus on self-care and rebuilding my life, reminding me that it's okay to prioritize my own well-being. One unexpected outcome of this whole ordeal has been reconnecting with some old friends from high school. After hearing about what happened, a few of them reached out to offer support. It's been nice to reminisce about happier times and to have people in my life who knew me before all this drama started. I'm still cautious about my safety, but I'm trying not to let fear control my life. I've installed a security system in my apartment and have been taking self-defense classes. It helps me feel more in control of my situation. As for my relationship with Johnny, I honestly don't know what the future holds right now. I need space and time to heal. Maybe someday, if he gets help and shows real change, we might be able to have some kind of relationship. But for now, I'm focused on protecting myself and honoring my dad's memory. I'm grateful for the support I've received from this community and from the people in my life who have stood by me. Your kind words and advice have been a lifeline during this difficult time. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm trying to focus on the positive changes I can make in my life and the ways I can carry forward my dad's legacy. Thank you all for listening and for being there throughout this journey. I'll update if anything significant changes, but for now, I'm going to focus on healing and moving forward. Now on to the next story. Story 6. Before we were married, my pregnant wife had an affair. I learned this during our visit with the doctor. I look at my wife as I sit in the doctor's office waiting room and smile. After 5 amazing years of marriage, today marks a significant milestone for us. Our first prenatal visit. With her hand gently resting on her still small belly, my wife is positively glowing while we wait to hear back. We talk informally and joke about possible baby names and nursery decor. That we are finally beginning a family makes me very happy. 8 years ago, mutual friends arranged for us to go on a blind date. After just a few minutes of talking, I knew she was the one. It seemed to be meant to be. A year later, we were married and went on to create a wonderful life together, exploring the world, advancing our careers, and having similar aspirations for the future. We decided that it was time to grow our family now that we were in our early 30s. We were ecstatic when the pregnancy test results showed positivity right away. My spouse is currently 10 weeks pregnant. Our nearest and dearest friends and family are overjoyed that we told them. I'm aware that our parents are eager to become grandparents. After the nurse calls my wife's name, we return to the examination room. The physician enters, gives us heartfelt congratulations, and begins discussing the routine examinations they will perform that day. My spouse is scheduled to undergo blood work to monitor hormone levels and other markers of a well-progressing pregnancy. We're both healthy and have been taking prenatal vitamins, so I don't see any problems. This is just routine. After taking a few vials of blood, the nurse informs us that the doctor will return soon with the results. I hold my wife's hand and express my love and gratitude for our family. I genuinely think I'm the luckiest man alive. We have just a few more months until our little one is born. As we wait for the doctor to return, my wife and I carry on our conversation in the exam room in an attempt to kill time. She makes fun of me for being squeamish during the delivery, and I joke that I should get plenty of sleep now before the baby keeps us up all night. We share a laugh, and both of us are still very excited. The doctor eventually returns after a further 20 minutes or so, carrying a folder. She gives us a kind greeting, sits down, and opens the file. So far, everything looks great, she smiles. Your blood work indicates you are a healthy, young woman with no red flags for pregnancy complications. With a look of relief on our faces, my wife gives me a firm squeeze. The physician turns to a different page. I do want to confirm your blood type, though. According to the test results, you are B positive. Is that correct? My spouse opens her mouth to reply, but she hesitates. Her eyebrows are slightly furrowed as she glances at me. My chest constricts as the doctor's words take hold. B positive? That isn't possible. 6 years ago, I vividly recall when my wife returned home late from a night out with friends. She mentioned that she had to give blood to a friend who had been involved in an accident and whose blood type was O negative. I remember her telling me that her blood type matched that of only a few people in their group. Honey, I inquired softly, didn't you say you were O negative at the time Ellis needed blood? My spouse gazed around anxiously. She stammers, oh, maybe the test is wrong. I'll have them run it again. However, her face tells me the truth. That evening, she told me a lie. She covered up something with a lie she didn't want me to know. Knowing that our lives will never be the same, I feel as though the world is crumbling beneath me. My thoughts quickly return to the life-altering work trip that took place 6 years ago. It was the longest we had been apart since we were married. 2 weeks that I was gone. I was unable to miss this crucial business summit. My wife told me to concentrate on work, but she said she would be okay on her own. Everything was going well on the trip until that fateful evening when she failed to return home or return my calls. I can still feel the pit in my stomach when she didn't respond when 10 o'clock rolled around. Every time I tried to reach her, her phone went to voicemail. As I paced our apartment, I prepared myself for the worst. At last, she called early the following morning to share her experience of giving blood to her friend, Ellis, who had allegedly been in an accident. Her explanation didn't sit well with me, especially since she was unable to provide any information regarding the accident or hospital, but I chose to assume the best when I spoke with her. I had no concrete proof of any wrongdoing, and our marriage had been great until then. I desired to have faith in her. That evening has been eating away at me for years. I filed it away as hard evidence of her deception when she mentioned absent-mindedly that she had O negative blood at that time. However, I couldn't be positive that she had cheated. I told myself that bringing it up would only spark a fight. It was simpler to ignore it and carry on as though everything was all right between us. However, I can now see that my worst fears have come true because of the shocked expression on her face when the doctor revealed her true blood type. Back then, she tricked me to cover up her adultery. Our marriage seems to be falling apart, and I'm afraid of what will happen next. My idealized life was merely a delusion, and the truth would cause everything to crumble. I keep thinking about that suspicious night 6 years ago. Back in the exam room, my wife's blood type revelation has destroyed my faith. I require responses. I ask in a tense voice. How could your blood type be different now? Do you have an explanation for this? My wife moves in her chair and doesn't look at me. She stutters, I must have been confused back then. It was so long ago. I give a head shake. That's not good enough. You distinctly said you were O negative when you donated blood. Why would you lie about that? She stops talking and fixes her gaze on her hands. The physician casts an uneasy glance between us. I say more firmly, I think you need to be honest with me. Does this have anything to do with the night you came home late from being out with Ellis? With tears sparkling in her eyes, my spouse raises her head to face me. She inhales nervously. Okay, yes. I cheated on you that night. I'm so sorry. It feels like someone punched me in the stomach. It is devastating to have her confess, even though I suspected it. Who was he? I remember to myself. She describes it as a one-time error. She quickly regretted it. She involved a man she met at the bar. She cries and apologizes profusely as I press for more information. As I attempt to comprehend this betrayal, my heart races. She begs me to forgive her, but I'm having trouble thinking clearly at the moment. I sense that our marriage's foundation is crumbling. She keeps attempting to defend herself, but I'm done listening. I require room to think. I start to get up, interrupting her in the middle of her statement. I mumble, I can't do this right now. As I leave her sobbing in the waiting room, my spouse is seated in front of me, tears rolling down her cheeks as she relates the graphic details of her one-night encounter from 6 years prior. She was out drinking with friends when she met a man at a bar. After flirting throughout the evening, they made the snap decision to book a hotel room together when the bar closed. It just happened so fast, she sobs. I was drunk and wasn't thinking clearly. As soon as it was over, I regretted it. I felt so ashamed and guilty for betraying you in our marriage. She continues by explaining her later lying. She was aware that our whole relationship would fall apart if she became clean about cheating. She created the false narrative to hide her tracks because she was terrified of losing me and the happy future we had planned together. She also lived in constant fear of the truth coming to light. I sit here dumbfounded, not knowing how much of a liar she has been for all these years. I had total faith in her. We were meant to be soulmates, if not partners. How could she pretend everything was fine while lying to my face every day? My dismay gradually gives way to rage when I reflect on all the occasions I've questioned her strange behavior over the years. She's always come up with an explanation that I was able to accept. I feel like such an idiot for not seeing this earlier. I ask nicely, how am I ever supposed to trust you again? Our entire marriage has been built on a lie. Did our vows mean anything to you? I resist her hand as it reaches out to grab mine. There is no longer the woman I thought I knew. Her infidelity has blown up our hopes for a future together. I ignored the doctor's cries for help and stormed out of the office. I doubt that I will ever be able to forget this betrayal. I hurriedly left the doctor's office, barely registering my wife's tears as I went. I slam the door loudly behind me as I make my way to my car, the rage coursing through my veins. I drive aimlessly out of the parking lot while my head spins. In this way, how could she betray me for years? The woman I believe to be the most familiar with me has been deceiving me. Was this whole thing a fake? I'm lost in thought as I drive through the city streets, gripping the steering wheel firmly. I've been driving around for a few hours now, and I know I can't go home this evening. I need some time and space to process the devastating blow she just dealt to our marriage. Because I'm too overwhelmed right now, it would be too much to face her now in our shared, sentimental home. I drive across town and into my cousin's driveway. I've always thought of him as a brother. I rap on his door while attempting to compose myself. He holds me when he notices the expression on my face. I sob uncontrollably and tell him everything. The lies, the affair, everything, all of it. He tells me to stay as long as I need to and makes up the spare bed. That night, as I lay there reliving my wife's confession over and over, I felt numb. How could I have known earlier? Over the years, did I miss any signs? I remember how she looked at me on our wedding day. So full of love. Was everything a lie? I heard through the future we had planned, which is now ruined. I'm not sure if I even want to, or if we can recover from this. I need some time off together, the pieces of my broken life, for the time being. Barely conscious of my surroundings, I pull into my cousin's driveway. My wife just gave me a bombshell, and I'm still processing it. My cousin notices something is seriously wrong when he looks at me as I clumsily make my way to the front door. As he leads me inside, he asks what happened. I collapse onto the couch and put my hands over my head, whispering, "She cheated on me 6 years ago. I just found out today." My cousin's expression changes from one of worry to shock as I look up. I then tell him the entire tale, including the dubious night she failed to return home, the fabrication about her blood type, and her emotional admission at the doctor's office. My cousin lets me vent while he sits quietly and listens to me talk. He takes a seat on the couch beside me. When I'm done, "I'm so sorry," he says, sounding genuinely sorry. "I can't imagine how betrayed you must feel. No one should have to go through this." "I know." Feeling rises in my throat. He gives me a comforting pat on the back. "Stay here as long as you need to clear your head," he says to me. "You shouldn't be alone right now. Take the spare bedroom. It's yours." I'm incredibly appreciative and thank him profusely for his support during this nightmare. He brews some tea, and we spend the long evening chatting. Even though I know the journey ahead will be difficult and drawn out, it helps to have someone to listen. I need to get away from my wife for a bit to process everything. This house has become my haven, providing solace during the storm of emotions. At my cousin's house, I wake up in the spare bedroom and momentarily forget everything that happened the day before. The doctor's appointment, my wife's heartbreaking admission, and the depressing realization that my marriage is based on deception. All come rushing back when I grab my phone to see what time it is. I discover that I have numerous missed calls and texts. It appears that my spouse told our families about her affair, and now they are frantically attempting to get in touch with me. I go through the messages by scrolling. They range from expressing sympathy for my predicament to pleading with me to refrain from making any snap decisions. My spouse's texts are almost nonsensical. They contain misspelled condolences, declarations of love, and assurances that she will stop at nothing to make things right. However, I'm not yet prepared to handle any of them. I require time and room to come to terms with this betrayal on my own. My cousin is preparing breakfast in the kitchen, so I turn off my phone and head there. After I've had some sleep, he asks if I'm doing any better. My stomach hurts, so I just sit down to eat and silently shake my head. He won't put pressure on me like the others, and I know he'll let me talk when I'm ready. I find solace in the peaceful haven he's provided for the time being, far from the mayhem at home, but I'm aware that I'll eventually have to deal with the disorganized fallout. All I can do is hope that I'll have the fortitude and discernment to choose what's best for our unborn child and myself. My wife's name is flashing on the screen as my phone rings once more. I get angry and hurt all over again just looking at it. I don't listen and hit ignore, deleting her voicemail. The texts from her, our families, and friends also don't stop coming in, though. Every notification is like salt in an open wound. I know they mean well. Right now, I'm not able to respond to their inquiries or viewpoints. My cousin notices that I was becoming agitated after my mother-in-law called me 3 times. He says softly, "Hey, don't feel obligated to respond. Everyone processes things differently. Take all the space you need." I thank him for his advice and nod. He's right. At this moment, I need to block out the outside world and concentrate inside. I know that if I jump in too soon, I'll say things I'll regret. I kept ignoring the calls and texts for the next few days. It takes a lot of willpower for me to contain my hurt and annoyance. However, I am aware that acting rashly won't solve the problem. My cousin gives me space when I need it but checks in on me from time to time. His house is a peaceful haven where I can think without feeling obligated or scrutinized. I slowly work through the emotions that are whirling inside of me by crying, journaling, and taking long walks. Eventually, I know I have to face it all. For the time being, though, I'm appreciative of this break and the opportunity to begin my healing process before allowing others back in. I may not know how to proceed, but I'm starting here, in the safety of my cousin's house. I sit alone with my thoughts, and they always seem to stray back to 8 years ago when I met my wife. Mutual friends set me up on a blind date with her. I fell in love with her the moment I laid eyes on her. Her easy laugh and warm smile drew me in, as did her compassionate and kind demeanor. We clicked right away. An easy conversation ensued as we soon realized how much we had in common. We shared the same goals of seeing the world, raising a family, and experiencing life to the fullest. I had a good feeling after only a few dates that she was the one. During our engagement and the first few years of our marriage, we made a lot of plans for the future. We would raise 3 children and a dog while backpacking through Europe and purchasing a lakefront cottage for our summertime getaways. Our life together seemed full of opportunities. Her betrayal has now destroyed all of those dreams. I'm having a hard time making sense of the woman who has been lying to me for the past 8 years, and my mind is racing. I genuinely thought our relationship was special and that we were soulmates. However, it was obvious that I was dreaming. Alternatively, it's possible that she has evolved and is no longer the person I knew. Either way, it's not the life I imagined. Our marriage will never be the same. Carefree, innocent love. Even if we manage to work things out, it's nearly unbearable how much pain and disappointment there is. I've lost my wife, and I've lost the future I looked forward to. What should I do next? How can I pick myself up and make a fresh start? One thing is certain. Things will never be the same in my life. I hear a sudden, frantic knocking at the front door while I'm sitting in my cousin's living room. My wife's voice interrupts me before I can respond, begging desperately, "Please let me in. We need to talk about this." She keeps pleading with me through the closed door to give her another chance, promising to do whatever it takes to make things right. I freeze. I feel emotionally reeling again when I hear her voice. With a worried expression on his face, my cousin approaches. "Do you want me to get rid of her?" he inquires. I'm not ready to see her or talk to her just yet, but I also feel bad that she caught us off guard here. My cousin walks toward the door as I give a quiet nod. I hear him telling her to get off the property right away. She cries and tries to push past him into the house, but he refuses. I just can't take it anymore. I use my cell phone to call 911 and let the operator know that my estranged wife is on the property and won't leave. 10 minutes later, 2 police cars arrive. My wife is given a brief explanation by the officers before being led to one of their cars. As they drive away, she keeps crying and beseeching the house with her eyes. I took a trembling breath after the confrontation. My cousin told me that I made the right choice. She was disregarding my need for privacy. I just need some alone time to process everything right now, even though I know I'll have to deal with the fallout eventually. I'm still safe inside my cousin's house during this storm. I finally worked up the courage to listen to some of the voicemails from family members after going more than a week without speaking to anyone. My parents are sorry about the circumstances but advise me to hold off on making any decisions just yet. My mother-in-law is crying and begging me not to leave my pregnant wife behind when she needs help. Although my wife made a grave error, she has been a mess in her attempts to atone. She claims, "I hesitated after hearing their points of view. I haven't thought about how my leaving will affect my wife and unborn child because I'm too angry and hurt. Is it right that I keep to myself while she handles the fallout on her own? I'm not sure what the right thing to do is at this moment." After all of the lies and betrayal, a part of me still shudders at the mere thought of seeing her. However, I also have obligations as a husband and a prospective father. My cousin notices that I'm conflicted. He declares, "There's no right or wrong here. It's a painful situation either way, but you have time to think it through before making any permanent decisions." I understand his point. I don't have to decide today if I can forgive her or if divorce is inevitable. I remain in my haven for the time being and continue to think, feeling encouraged by my family, even though I'm having trouble deciding what to do next. The moral conundrum bothers me, but being by myself helps me see things. I decided that I needed to know what was available to me, so I scheduled a meeting with a divorce attorney. She takes me through the steps involved in a formal separation and explains what to anticipate in terms of child support and custody. She explains that rather than going through with the divorce right now, it would be better for me financially and legally to try to make amends with my wife because the baby is probably mine biologically. I would have to pay a hefty monthly child support if we got divorced. Additionally, since the child is still so young, I probably wouldn't get joint custody, just visitation rights. But if my wife and I can sort things out instead, I can still play a significant role as the child's father without the costs and hassles of a contentious legal battle. The attorney outlines how reconciliation might be more beneficial in this case while still making it clear that it's my decision. I feel torn as I leave the meeting. On the one hand, my wife's deceit and lies continue to cause me great pain, but I don't want to act irrationally now and end up regretting it later. My unborn child comes to mind who asked for none of this. Is it right to ignore them as a form of punishment? Easy answers do not exist. We discussed the lawyer's recommendations when I returned to my cousin's house. He concurs. For the sake of the child, at the very least, I might want to try if there's any possibility of forgiving and reestablishing trust. I still have a lot of introspection to do. I finally called my wife after suffering for weeks, telling her I was ready to meet and work things out. On the phone, she sobs with relief. The following day, we decided to meet at a coffee shop. I arrive early, feeling sick to my stomach. She has dark circles under her eyes and appears pale and drawn when she first walks in. We sit down and awkwardly greet each other at first. The talk is painful and halting. She starts by making frantic pleas, promising to do anything, including going to counseling and taking a lie detector test, to save our marriage. She's ready to disgrace herself for me to stay. I clarify that after such a severe betrayal, I'm still not sure if I can ever trust her again. I need some time to figure out whether, emotionally, I can even work toward reconciliation. When she detects my indecisiveness, she gets more agitated. I have to ask her not to push the matter and to give me time to think this through. I'm not yet prepared to make any firm decisions. We have finally concluded that the purpose of this initial meeting was simply to air concerns rather than move quickly toward a resolution. She looks like she's in pain, but I can't promise anything about the future right now. We part amicably for the time being, both of us feeling depressed and uncertain what lies ahead. What lies ahead for me is still unknown. It has been 2 months since my wife's infidelity was revealed, completely upending my life. Not long after our first counseling session, I returned from my cousin's house. We both felt uncomfortable around each other in the first few weeks and avoided each other like the plague. Even now, the pain still flares up out of the blue whenever I catch her texting or see that she is running late for work. But things are improving gradually. My wife is there to listen and reassure me as a therapist encourages us to talk honestly about my persisting mistrust. I am aware that it will take some time to reestablish closeness and love. There are days when I want to give up because I think there is no way I can recover from such a betrayal. But then I'll catch a glimpse of her protruding belly and feel hopeful that our child will arrive soon. Our goal is to become a family. When I need space, my wife is understanding and patient with me. She seems determined to earn my trust again by being honest. I can now see how afraid she was years ago to own up to her error. Back then, we both aided in judgment. I have cautious optimism that our marriage can become stronger than it has ever been with work, but that naive old trust has faded. I think about our first love a lot. It was simple and innocent. We can never go back to that, but we can replace it, brick by brick, with something brand new. Although we both think it's worth a shot, it won't be simple. Now on to the next story. Story 7. Am I wrong for not allowing my in-laws to see my daughter after they gave her medication? I know how the title sounds, but please bear with me. Throwaway for obvious reasons. I, 24M, and my wife, 24, recently had our daughter in July. She is the best thing to ever happen to my wife and I, and we couldn't be more thrilled to have our little bundle of joy. She recently got sick while staying with her grandparents, my in-laws, while my wife and I took a trip for work. For context, my in-laws are really big into LifeWave X39. It's some patch that supposedly helps regrow stem cells by reflecting light rays back into your body, allowing your body to produce more stem cells to fight off diseases and sickness. If you ask me, it sounds like snake oil, and my wife agrees, calling it a pyramid scheme. The only way to get said patches is by spending well over $1,000, and then you're tasked with selling the patches yourself. It's essentially some multi-level marketing product where the more patches you sell, the more money you make, falling right in line with my wife's comparison to a pyramid scheme. But MLMs are somehow legal now. I've tried doing research on X39, and the only comments I've seen praising said product are brand new accounts never used before or after, Or their entire profile is dedicated to shilling out for LifeWave X39. In my own research, they appear to just be overpriced stickers. They contain no medication, no special UV rays or anything of the sort. They're literally just an overpriced sticker with an air bubble. But my wife and I have made it very clear that we wanted no part in X39, nor did we want our daughter to have it. Even if it's fake, we wanted no part in it, and on the off chance it did something, I didn't want our daughter to be used as their lab rat or guinea pig. Now before we left our daughter with my in-laws, we provided them with some infant medication just in case she got sick. Can never be too safe, you know? Well, we returned home from our work trip early because our daughter wasn't getting any better. So we picked her up and went home. We were going to give her a bath, and in the process of taking her jacket off, we found an X39 patch on her arm. Upon finding it, we immediately called her parents and demanded to know why she had a patch on her. Her parents tried saying that it's safe for babies. We even ordered the ones for ages 7 and younger, and that it's practically medication. Their words, which still didn't answer our question. So my wife checked the go bag, and the Motrin we gave them was, while it was used, not used very much at all. Her parents tried claiming that someone else in their group or whatever gave it to their son, and they got better in a week. Point is, we didn't buy it, nor did we care. We've made it abundantly clear that we wanted nothing to do with X39, and we didn't want our daughter to be a part of it. They failed to listen. My wife was on the phone with them for over an hour, and while I don't know the exact length the conversation went to, I know it at least ended with her screaming, "You're never going to see my daughter again, and if you attempt to come to my house we will call the police," before hanging up. That was 3 days ago now, and we've had several missed calls from family members. Her parents, her siblings, and even family friends all saying that we overreacted and they were just trying to help. Maybe we overreacted, but we wanted nothing to do with that, and despite making it clear, they went against our wishes and did it anyways. And instead of giving my daughter actual medication, they tried to give her some placebo patch. Her parents tried claiming that we're stopping them from seeing their only grandchild over something so small, but we didn't want to hear it. Comments where OP has replied. Comment 1. I kinda thank you for leaving your sick baby to go out of town. P. We didn't leave a sick baby to go out of town. We left her with her grandparents while she was fine. We only packed Motrin because, as I stated in my post, you can never be too careful. She got sick while we were out of town, not before. Comment 2. You say that like it's snake oil. Like it's just as bad as the X39 was. It Advil and cough syrup, or just a generic bottle that you wrote infant medication on. You expect us to believe that you gave them medication just in case she got sick and then she immediately got sick? Come on, this sounds like total BS. OP. Grandparents don't exactly have children medication laying around. We packed our Motrin, which I quite literally stated later in the post had you read it. Not some generic bottle or snake oil, and just as bad. Nor do they have the ability to really go anywhere. They live a good 30 to 40 minutes outside of any nearby town. The drive to and from her parents is a grand whole hour drive from where we live. And my wife and I quite literally work with sick people all the time. No, I'm not a doctor, nor do we have medical expertise, so my wife and I contracting something is usually pretty high. So we pack Motrin, or whatever the store brand is, that we'll buy every time we left her with her grandparents for more than a day. Update. About a month ago I made this post ranting about my in-laws' weird obsession with a, for lack of a better term, cult regarding stem cell regeneration through patches, which clearly isn't a real thing. There's been some development on that end, and while I'm confident things will likely end here, I wanted to give a quick update for those who may have been curious. I'm writing this on the toilet at work, so don't mind the rush of it all. After my wife essentially cut ties with them and we all received a million phone calls and text messages from family and friends, things quieted down for about a week or two. We started having my sister watch our daughter instead when we had to work. We haven't had another out-of-town trip since the initial post. However, through those couple of weeks we never really heard anything beyond a couple of supposed talking posts on Facebook bitching about us, but I can't seem to find the posts. We thought things were probably hopefully going to end there, but boy were we wrong, and this is quite the jump from the last post. My wife and I were visited by CPS about 2 weeks ago or so after they received concerning calls about supposed child abuse and negligence within the household. Of course, nothing like that happened, and the caseworker was very quick to see that. We had asked who reported her, and while she couldn't say, we had a suspicion it was from her parents. We were completely helpful and cooperative with the caseworker, and after she left that night, my wife called her mom up and asked her if she's the one who called CPS. Surprisingly, her mother took full accountability, but not so surprisingly tried to spin it around in her favor, claiming that she did it for our own good because our daughter was sick and she wasn't getting any better when she was there. So clearly we were doing something awful as parents. Kids get sick, it happens, but they're also extreme anti-vaxxers. Not just COVID, I mean everything from even as something as trivial as the flu shot. Yet they're willing to shill out thousands of dollars for some supposed stem cell regeneration sticker. The hypocrisy and irony in there is unmatched. My wife didn't really know how to react to that, so she basically told her mom to go to hell, and she wants nothing to do with her again. I know I saw a few comments on the last post saying we shouldn't have cut them out entirely, but now I'm starting to question why we didn't cut them out years ago before our daughter was even a thought in our heads. About a week after the first audit, my mother-in-law showed up to our house on my day off while my wife was at work and essentially demanded to see our daughter, forcing her way into our home by pushing past my arm when I told her to get the hell out of my house. She had no business barging in here like that. She essentially told me that I'm unfit to be a parent because I'm depriving my daughter of help she desperately needed because she's clearly a very sick child. My daughter is perfectly healthy right now and in fact has had no stuffy nose and no high temperature. Nothing. I told my ML straight up that she was bats hit insane. I went off on her about how she lied to us, went against our wishes, had the audacity to call and lie to CPS and then show up at our house unannounced and uninvited and march herself inside, as well as everything about her X39 LifeWave. We argued there for a while before I finally got so fed up I told her to leave my house before I called the police. She stormed out of the house and in true Karen fashion said, "This isn't over," before slamming my door. I immediately called my wife, who was of course irate. The following morning we filed a restraining order at the courthouse from her mom and dad because they're clearly not in their right mindset. The caseworker had to audit us a few more times as per their guidelines over the past 2 weeks, and yesterday was her last day, where she informed us that we're doing good and she's sorry for the trouble they caused. We kept her up to speed on the LifeWave, the showing up unannounced and the restraining order, and that she couldn't really take a side. She seemed apologetic, but my wife and I are pretty livid. We started looking at houses in another state to get as far away from her in-laws as possible. Our company has offices out there, so it's entirely possible we could just be transferred, so we're crossing our fingers that all goes well. The restraining order gets filed soon enough and we'll get a place clear across the country so that this will hopefully be my last update. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.